Good morning, YouTube. In today's video, I'm going to be answering your questions from my latest community post. If you would like me to answer your questions in another video, please leave them in the comments section below or in the next community post that I put out. So let's get started. First question comes from Adrian Facci. Having some trouble squatting to parallel with moderate load due to low back pain. Without knowing anything else, what would you say are the most common causes and fixes for low back pain when squatting? So when it comes to really general answers like this, I have to admit it's kind of irresponsible for me to give a clear-cut answer. Now, obviously I can just shoot things in the dark and, maybe by chance I'll hit the right answer and get the target, but that's not really my usual go around of doing things, right? I will give you a general answer, but I do want to put that out as a disclaimer because I might be giving answers that may not be relevant to you, Adrian, but also to anyone else listening. I think that more information, more data that you can accumulate, that you can gather, that you can then glean and make some inferences on and then take action on is going to be the best thing that you can do. As far as general places to start, first and foremost is I would ask how much direct core and direct low back work you do. Oftentimes I find that just by doing more targeted work, that can be of benefit to alleviating pain. Other things that I would ask is, how's your form? Oftentimes that's something that we actually don't really think about too much and we don't put too much stock into. Your form will sometimes dictate whether or not a movement feels good or not. You might have been taught to look like a certain person, squat like a certain person, squat like you're in a certain textbook, but that does not necessarily mean that you should actually do that. Your form is a very individual thing. There are, of course, good pillars or good basic principles that your form should adhere to, but as far as like how it's going to look, that will vary. Other causes for low back pain, your lifestyle. How often are you sitting? How frequently are you actually using your hips, walking around, doing other dynamic movements? Those are all things that can definitely impact how your low back feels. I'm not an expert on low back pain. I'm not an expert in physical therapy by any means. So I think it's worthwhile to consider a lot of different avenues, a lot of different things that you can go about. And of course, if low back pain is severe enough, do go see a medical professional and take each of what I said with a grain of salt. All right, next question comes to us from Felice Rookie. How long do you usually rest on compounds and for accessories? So there's a couple different topics I want to touch in with this question. As far as compounds, I recommend resting 2 to 3 minutes. Longer rest times, especially on compound movements, are going to be of a great benefit to you. So you can definitely bump that up to 4 or 5. And for accessories, it really depends on what you mean by accessory. Accessory is a very broad term, and this is why I kind of like the more, I guess, conjugate or concurrent way of looking at certain exercises as your main lifts, your supplemental lifts, and then your accessories. I kind of like that. I mean, of course, accessories, like, I'm sure my friend is twitching to be like, it's called bodybuilding work and put some respect on it, and he's right. Just because, oh, sorry, that's my alarm. Just because it's an accessory, it deserves just as much intent behind it as your main lifts. So when it comes to accessories though, so let's talk about single joint isolation movements. So bicep curls, tricep extensions, lateral raises, things of that nature. Me personally, I think it's okay to just do a really big giant set, and once you're done with that circuit, essentially, you go back to the beginning, and there should have been enough time in between, so, assuming you're not hitting the same muscle, that you've been rested. That's one way of going about things. Like, just do everything in a giant set and just circle back. So you can do, let's say, biceps, forearms, triceps, delts, and then that should give you enough time when you go back to biceps that you're good. Another way of you can go about things is just, a minute. Just rest a minute. I don't think you really need too much more beyond that, depending on how you load it. So that's a very important thing also. So let's say you're doing pretty substantially heavy, like barbell curls or even heavy skull crushers. Yeah, rest that 2 minutes. 2 minutes is a very good starting point as far as like most things. And then it just comes down to either dialing it up when necessary or bringing it down. If you feel ready, go for it. Now for compounds, like I said, On compound movements, because performance is something that you want to keep fairly pristine, your rep quality, and you don't want to be going to failure, if anything, 1 rep shy, then as a result, I would recommend that 3 to 5 rest interval, but 2 minutes is fine there also. It just kind of depends on you and what you're trying to get out of your training. If you want to kind of have built-in rest capacity or built-in work capacity and conditioning into your program, the easiest thing you can do for that is to lower your rest time. Is that going to be optimal for hypertrophy and for strength? No, it will not be. But like I said, it depends. If you are more focused on hypertrophy, longer rest times, and strength for that matter as well, longer rest times are going to be of benefit to you, but longer will depend on the movement itself, how heavy you're loading it, your own strength on that movement, and that can vary and that will change. Next question. As a beginner in weight training with a calisthenic background, what should I focus on? So 2 years of calisthenics is what Lel Draco says. And I like the picture of a dog as his profile picture. So as a beginner in weight training, so with a calisthenics background, first and foremost, I'm going to assume a couple things about you, because in 2 years with a calisthenics background, you should be able to rep out anywhere between 10 to 20 pull-ups, dips probably in that same range. You should be able to do 30 to 60 push-ups, I would assume, and maybe the same amount of reps for bodyweight squats, inverted rows, and what else, right? So there's a couple things with calisthenics that just will not be sufficiently developed as a result of you doing calisthenics. Your legs, your lower back, and that's essentially it. I think calisthenics, like if you add load especially, your upper body development can be comparable, maybe not 1-to-1, because you also aren't, because like your main pressing movements are just the push-up, dip, and body, and like what's the word I'm looking for? Handstand push-up. And handstand push-ups are a chatty lift. Like they're one of the best lifts that you can do for your shoulder, and they just look cool, you know? Like if you are an anime protagonist, you should be able to do handstand push-ups. I don't know. So if you want to be the hero of your own story, I think that's a good place to start. But as far as what you should start on, yeah, start including some lower back work, start including more leg work, squats, deadlifts, and, you know, high bar squat, heel elevated squats, Smith machine squats, hack squats, leg press. Great movements. Stiff leg deadlift, Romanian deadlift, conventional deadlift, sumo, and then even barbell rows. I think barbell rows would be another good one that you can add in. I think barbell rows kind of get a bad rap because, you know, they're not the friendliest on stimulus to fatigue ratio, but part of it, in my opinion, I think is just because we like to think that because we can go heavy on barbell rows that we have to. Not necessarily. The most important thing with a movement and your weight selection is, are you training sufficiently difficult? Are you training sufficiently close to failure? And that can be done with heavy weights, and it can be done with light weights. And I think the barbell row is a movement that you should do with lighter weights for more reps. And yeah, so if you are coming from calisthenics, focus on your lower back and your legs. Start slowly adding things in that can complement your calisthenics, like dumbbell pressing, or things of that nature, right? Next question comes from Jake. How do you determine how long a strength program should last? Should I make sure I'm working up to a certain percentage of my 1RM before I start a new program and switch up the exercises? So one of the books that I think is pretty good to, you know, it's one of those like books that are just generally recommended for people looking into getting into strength training, is Practical Programming. So I know it's written by Mark Ripito, but it's also written by Andy Baker, which is a huge up to it. So I think that's one of a really good book to read. And here's the thing, as crazy as Mark Ripito gets, that none of that takes away from how correct he was in some things in that book in particular. So I think that's a great place to start. Now, as far as like how long should a strength program last, there's a couple different ways I can answer this question. First and foremost, I personally think that 9 weeks is the absolute minimum, because then you can do like 3-week waves that build you up and then taper you down into a peaked state. And that's a very condensed timeline. I don't necessarily think that that's, and like I said, that is the absolute minimum. But as far as like what I would actually recommend, I think it should be longer than that. I think it should be like 4 to 6 months, maybe even a whole year. The difficult part about a lot of strength programs is the fact that because a lot of free strength programs that you see on the internet are 4 week previews of a 4 month program, which is why I feel that some people have this perception that strength programs are shorter in comparison than what they really should be. 10 weeks is another great way of kind of going about things, because in 10 weeks you can run through a different variety of different rep ranges with the same movement, reset, go through that same volume thresholds once again, trying to break PRs along the way, and at which point you can then switch up exercises and move things around. Should I make sure I'm working up to a certain percentage of my 1 rep max? So here's the thing. When it comes to developing strength, most of the potent work that is actually going to go into you developing a new 1 rep max will be within that, let's say, 70 to 90% range. And of course, like going above that, helping you peak to get something above your current 1 rep max. But a lot of your work will come down to that 70, 75-ish to like 90-ish, 95-ish range. And that's something that you have to like build up to, work through, and then eventually go through that peak. And like I said, 9 to 10 weeks is a good starting point, but then it's all about stacking multiple rounds of those together before you switch things up. Starting a new program, switching up the exercises, like, you're not going to find that there is a cleaner strength progression by you doing something like, all right, I'm gonna start with starting strength, then I'm gonna do gray skull, then I'm gonna do Texas method, and then I'm gonna do this. That's not really how, in my opinion, you're gonna get your best strength results. Your best strength results will be from you being able to stick with the same thing, modify things as you accumulate and gather more data on yourself and your own performance, and then trying to beat that in an appropriate way. So like I said, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, you running through different volumes, let's say 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 8, 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3. And if you do 3 weeks at each of those volume thresholds, that's already a 12-week program. You're doing that on your bench press, and then when you reset back to 3 sets of 10, then you are trying to beat your last set AMRAPs on there, or you're trying to lift a little bit more than what you did before. So if you started with 135, now you're doing 145, 10 pounds higher, but then you're also hitting it for the same amount of volume. Boom, you've increased, you've progressed, and that's how you kind of go about things. Strength training is not a short-term thing. It is very much a long-term thing. You need to be patient, you need to be consistent, you need to be persistent as well. Omega D's, these nuts. I think I'm not gonna cut that out, but anyway, training timing. I like how to hype up for heavy training in the morning, only for lower body exercises, deadlifts, and squats. Spelled it with a G. That's that's dope. Anyway, training timing. So here's the thing. Training timing is a very personal thing. For example, myself, I actually don't like training in the evening. Sometimes I just have to do it out of necessity, because it's either waking up at 5 a.m. and going to the gym and then rushing to work, which it's not entirely a bad thing, but sometimes it can be pretty inconvenient depending on what time I actually get to bed, because I will get more sleep if I feel like that's the choices I have to make, more sleep or a workout. I will choose more sleep just because I think sleep is super important. But when I train in the evening, I do feel significantly more tired, and because it's usually after work, that 4 or 5 p.m. time, I'm definitely not taking caffeine at that point in time to not mess up my sleep, like I said. So training timing, like when you feel the strongest, training timing, honestly, the convenience factor is the most important thing, more than anything else. Like, what time can you reasonably fit in the gym at a consistent basis for that day? The next thing is, when do you feel the strongest in the day? For example, my girlfriend, she does not feel, nearly as strong in the mornings and the early afternoon as she does at night. If we have to do something together later in the evening, we work out in the day, she will find her numbers are significantly lower. Even if we just ate and she had a good amount of sleep. So there's that. How to hype up for heavy training in the morning. For one, it's going to be kind of hard if you're like one of those people who already feels incredibly tired in the morning. So as far as hyping up, you could use all those other extraneous means such as ammonia, pre-workout, or stuff like that. I don't really think it's necessary in training, however. I think in training, it's actually better to train in a more zen state, to be a bit more meditative with your training. But that's by no means required. That's by no means mandatory. That's just me. That's just my biases. That's just my opinion, and I'm allowed to have them. So as far as hyping yourself up in the morning, why do you need to hype yourself up so much? Are you actually training, or are you just constantly testing yourself in the gym? Like, I feel like if you're actually training, I mean, to be fair, there is a kind of like a switch that I think you need to be able to turn on in your head. Like, all right, it's work time, it's go time. But at the same time, like to actually just hype yourself up and like, want to go Super Saiyan on every set, that in and of itself is draining and not entirely necessary. I know it's really cool on Instagram, Reels or TikTok to like, have those like edits where you're just going super hard and like turn into a Super Saiyan. But training is not always that glamorous. It's more about, are you just focusing on the movement? Are you being honest with your warm-ups? Are you being honest with your form? Are you being intelligent in your load selection? And those are some questions that I would personally have when I have this type of question, simply because you don't need to be super hyped up all the damn time when you train. I hope that answered your question. All right. Adam Wilkinson, do you need to swap around exercises after a period of time because your body adapts and gets used to them? I hear it a lot, but I don't know whether to believe it or not. Okay, so, like I said, conjugate guys call this the law of accommodation, and then it's also been referred to as the repeated bout effect. The more novel a stimulus is, the bigger effect it has on the body. But here's the thing. Exercise variety, exercise rotation, that's just one way. If you change your sets, your reps, and the amount of weight you have on the bar, you are essentially changing the exercise. And well, not changing the exercise, but you're essentially bypassing that, that idea that, oh, it becomes less potent because your body gets used to it. Your body got used to 135 for 5. Then next week you do 145 for 5. It's not the same. Your proximity to failure will be different. Your the neural drive you will need to, depending on like what percentage of your 1 rep max is going to be different. I know 135 is like pretty light. So, and I'm not saying that's where you're at, but it's just an example. So do you need to swap around exercise after a period of time because your body adapts? I wouldn't say that you should switch because your body adapts. I would say you should switch because your body starts to leave things behind. So there's a weakness. You develop a weakness as a result of you getting stronger. If you stick with only one type of benching, if you find that your chest and shoulders take most of it and your triceps are being left behind, and then that starts to express itself by having a weaker lockout, then close grip benching and more tricep oriented pressing is just going to help you. So exercise changes are determined by need rather than because your body adapts to it. Hypertrophy is your body adapting to what you to your training. Strength is an adaptation or an adaptation to what you're presenting to your body. So the need of swapping around your exercises after a period of time because your body gets used to it, like I said, if you are changing your reps, sets, and weight, that's enough. And then if you change your exercise selection, it should be for other reasons, such as bringing up certain lagging body parts, bringing up your weaknesses, and going things around that. Atto Murky asks, what is the optimal volume for each muscle group if every set is taken to failure? All right, so this volume is one of those things where I feel like it's very much dependent on everything else in the program. One of which is, how close are you taking things to failure? The further away from failure you are, the more sets you'll need to compensate to get that level of difficulty in your training that will actually get you to grow. The closer you are to failure, the less of overall volume you will need because you're pushing it so close. You're redlining it all the time. How heavy you're going will affect the optimum volume. Your exercise selection will even change your optimal volume because the amount of quad work you can handle from squats is not going to necessarily be the same as you can handle from, let's say, leg extensions, which is why we have a wide variety of different exercises in our program if the goal is hypertrophy. So when you ask what is the optimal volume for each muscle group and taking a failure, I'm going to assume your goal is hypertrophy. Well, that question is dependent on, like I said, what exercises am I doing? How close to failure am I training? How heavy am I using? How heavy am I going on these exercises? Those are all things that are going to affect the optimal volume, because one thing that's really important to remember, volume is not just what gets your muscles to grow, it's whether or not you can actually recover from it. And training to failure is inherently much harder to recover from than not training to failure. But that also depends on the movement also. There are some movements you can go to failure, 5-6 days a week and you'll be fine. Bicep curls, rear delts, like push-ups, even pull-ups too. For some people, like if you're just completely new to pull-ups, probably not going to happen. So next question, or 1 second. Sorry about that, got a phone call. Okay, when I do the overhead press, the bar doesn't touch my chest because of the length of my forearms. Would it be better to widen the already shoulder width grip, or is this even an issue? I am by no means a master of biomechanics or anything of that nature, and I had a pretty good, I guess, feedback from someone on my my previous video discussing like ranges of motion. And here's the thing. Full range of motion can be accomplished in a wide variety of different ways. A variety of different exercises where you attack different parts of the range of motion of that muscle. But then also like a full range of motion on a movement can also depend on you, the lifter, what's comfortable for you. Now, the commenter who responded and gave me a point was that you should like maybe in the short term that's a good thing, but in the long term you should still have full range of motion of the joint. And here's the thing. Full range of motion of the joint is not necessarily the full range of motion of the exercise. I do believe that you should have, if you have healthy shoulders, you should be able to have full range of motion in the shoulder. But that doesn't necessarily mean you need to express that with your overhead press. So I don't think it's that big of an issue. I think that if you are bringing it, to chin-ish level, bringing it to a point that's comfortable where you feel the shoulders being the limiting factor, you're fine. Now, I guess as a health standpoint, you should be doing, your band work, your rotator cuff work, other shoulder exercises to just make sure that your shoulders are healthy and you can move the shoulders through a full range of motion. Steve, that question was from Keaton. Sorry about that. Steve Candathil. Are there any tips to make low bar squats less taxing on the shoulders, elbows, and wrists? If it's taxing on the shoulders, elbows, and wrists, I'm going to make the bold assumption that the weight is in your hands. And that's probably where a lot of that is coming from. Now, obviously, there is a mobility component to the low bar squat that could make it very taxing, especially because the weight is resting on your rear delt. So there's that. But at the same time, if you are standing a bit too upright, you should already have a preemptive lean when you are doing a low bar squat. If you're standing a bit too upright while trying to be in that low bar position, that is a lot of weight, not only on your rear delts, but also in your hands, which then elbows, wrists, and whatnot. So send me a form video, watch more form videos, experiment, move things around, try keeping your elbows in line with your body to get your lats involved. Those are all some places I would start. Mickey Chan, what's up, bro? When to use intensity techniques. So by intensity techniques, I'm going to assume you mean supersets, drop sets, myo reps, things of that nature. For me, I like to use intensity techniques on my smaller movements. So for example, I don't really do more than 3 sets of leg extensions and leg curls. I do what I call a intensity progression. Any of my clients who are working with me are familiar with this, where we do 2 sets of 10 to 20. Week 1 is you're just going to failure, and you can go above 20, but you most definitely should not be going below 10. Well, you just go to failure on week 1. Week 2, you're going to go to failure, and then you're going to add a drop set. So 2 to 3 drop sets. And then week 3, you're going to do myo reps. So after you hit failure, after that second set, you start doing like rest pause stuff. And then you reset, go back to just going to failure. And ideally, there's a couple things that can happen. Either you add weight or you hit failure with more reps. And that's kind of when to go about things. So that's one place to use it. That's one way to use it. Another way to use it is just depending on your time. Like, for example, if you like training like Brian Alsru and want to do giant sets, that's another intensity technique that keeps the density of your workout high. So those are great places to use it. You don't have to use it. You don't have to use it for strength. You don't have to use it for building muscle. You use it when you want to. So I hope that was a good answer. Next question comes from Hello YouTube. It's really Hello YouTube, so it's the American version, I guess. How to stimulate the muscle for growth without hurting the structure, or how to train effectively until you die without hurting the structure. I'm not sure how to interpret that question. The first way that comes to mind is without hurting like your joints, ligaments, connective tissues, like how to curl without elbow pain, maybe how to bench without elbow pain. So first and foremost is having a balanced program, like, you know, a near equal amount of pulling and pushing in the program, isolation exercises to work the strength of the tendons associated with those movements, or maybe not tendons, but you know what I mean, but working those connective tissues, right? So that's one real good benefit of like isolation movements, beyond this the fact that they actually make you look jacked. So training effectively until you die, appropriate load selection, a balanced workout program with multiple exercises, no minimalism, and a healthy lifestyle, a good diet, being active throughout your day. That in and of itself will take care of most of your stuff. How to stimulate the muscle: train close to failure, or train close to failure, so like 1 to 4 reps shy of failure on most lifts. The further away you are from failure, I would or the lighter you have to train, the more volume you should do. The heavier you're training, the less volume you'll do. So there's that. Last question comes from Dumpy. How the fuck do you deload? How often? Are there differences in deloading when training for size versus strength? How do you deload? It depends. There's 2 trains of thought. You can deload from volume. You can deload from intensity. If you deload from intensity, that means the weight on the bar doesn't change. I personally am a fan of this because I don't like going back into the gym and having the weights feel foreign to me. So I just cut down on all the accessory work or all the bodybuilding work, all the high fatiguing, high volume stuff. And I will cut down on most of the volume on heavy compound movements. Like I'll just do 1 hard set with the weight I'm supposed to be taking next week, and then that's it. And then I just like go home, recover. When I'm deloading off of volume, I mean, that's not really what I do, but generally speaking, yeah, just take things to a top set and that's it. Don't do, or you can even just like, take it to a very easy set of like 10 or so. That's a very general, broad answer. How often? As often as you need it. I think the reason why certain programs have you take a pre-planned deload every 3rd or 4th week is because they expect you to push beyond your current limits right before that point. So as a result, you kind of need to. If you're running a pretty intelligent strength training program, though, as you start moving through different thresholds, as you modify things as time progresses throughout the program, there should be kind of like a natural deload occurring where let's say you drop down into a certain threshold, you do a rapid build up. Let's say you start at 70% week 1, 75% week 2, and then 80% week 3. And then you drop back down to 72.5% at a different volume threshold. Like you're doing 3 sets of 10 with what I just mentioned, and then you drop down to 72.5% for 3 sets of 8. So now you're doing less reps, you are doing more weight, but you're doing less weight than week 3 on week 4, and that already has a natural deload built in. Hopefully I didn't lose you there. I don't think I did. I think you're a very intelligent, most like everyone in here is a intelligent, handsome Chad who can follow along. So how often? Like I said, it depends. If you are literally redlining it, pushing it past your limits, yes, you will need that. If you are training and you are a very busy person, having some time, like, or having a week in your month, I found can just help the mental aspect of a lifter, where they just feel like they're not beholden to their workout program. They're still making great progress, still getting bigger, getting stronger, and they have the opportunity to take a week off from harder training to spend more time on other things, their kids, their family, their work, what else, anything like that. Are there differences in deloading when training for strength and size? Yes, but they're not as big as you would think. A deload is a deload. It's just you trying to recover. It's just you trying to flush out some fatigue so that way you can get back on the gain train. So I hope that answer was useful. I hope this video was useful. I really do appreciate all of the support from everyone to watch the channel, who subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, please like the video, comment, and subscribe. I really do appreciate everyone's support. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.